there's 3 different kinds of energy that Krishna has. The Antaranga Shakti, which is Krishna himself. It's completely spiritual, composed of Satchidananda, and it's fully spiritual. There's no tinge of material energy contained there. And then there's Bahiranga Shakti, which is the material energy, which is composed of the different elements: earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. So these 7 material elements, these elements are the material energy. Between those 2 elements is the Tatastha Shakti, which is the living entity, the Jiva. And that living entity becomes covered over by the material energy and can simultaneously be uncovered by the material energy. Just like if you go to Jagannath Puri. On the beach, sometimes the ocean covers the beach, sometimes it uncovers the beach, correct?
Yes.
So in the same way, the Jivas have a propensity to be covered by the material energy or uncovered by the material energy according to their desire. What's the verse I'm thinking of? Krishna bole si jeev nahir bahir mukh atayeva mayatare samsaratu. That due to the living entities, Krishna bole se jeev nahir bahir mukh. Anadi means since time immemorial, the living entity has been forgetful of Krishna. So since time immemorial, the living entity has been existing in this material world due to forgetfulness of Krishna. And this forgetfulness of Krishna comes from a desire to want to turn from Krishna. So when the living entity turns from Krishna, it becomes covered over by the material energy. So we have to develop a disposition of turning towards Krishna. So the demigods are trying to turn towards Krishna, but they're still affected by material desires. So they're the same as you and me in the sense that they have material desires and they aren't supreme completely. They're given a certain amount of Shakti by the Lord in order to manage the universal affairs of this world, like for instance the heat, the rain, the moon, all of these different aspects of creation, the ocean, are overseen by personalities who are highly powerful personalities. But they are ultimately jivas. So the difference is that demigods, they have to undergo birth, death, old age, and disease just like we do, provided their life is a lot longer than ours. But even Lord Brahma is in constant anxiety that one day he has to leave his position as Lord Brahma. So the difference between the Supreme and the demigods is that the Supreme is always in a position of supremacy, whereas the demigods can come down from that position of supremacy because they're ultimately influenced by karma. Abrahma bhuvanaloka punit arvito arjuna. So from the topmost living entity in the world, Brahma, down to the smallest ant, everyone is being tossed and turned up and down on this Ferris wheel of the material existence. Sometimes existing in a demigod's body, where they're provided a high level of material facility, and sometimes existing as a tiny worm where there's practically no facility. But they're all parts and parcels of Krishna. So what we can learn from this is that even if you go to the heavenly planets, actually practically I got a degree in religion. And one of the things that I learned is that many religions which speak about celestial beings like demigods existing, managing the different departments of the universe, is that practically all religions say the same thing about the heavenly kingdom. That there's politics, that there's war, that there's lust, envy, greed, all these things are still existing in the heavenly kingdom. Practically every Eastern tradition will talk about the heavenly realm in that way. So Lord Indra is in constant anxiety, Lord Brahma is in constant anxiety, despite the fact that there's heavenly enjoyment. because their position is still ultimately temporary. Although it's an extended duration, although there's more facility, there's constant anxiety. So the difference between Krishna and the demigods is that Krishna is existing in an eternal position of supremacy. The demigods are existing in a temporary position of supremacy. And the demigods are ultimately servants of Krishna. They're not the master. They're simply being given their power by Krishna. But they can lose that power at every moment. And the whole Srimad Bhagavatam talks about demigods losing that power. So we learn a valuable lesson from the demigods because we can actually relate with them in a lot of ways because they still have material desires and we still have material desires. We're not like pure devotees like Narottam Das Thakur, Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktivinoda Thakur. These very exalted Paramahamsa Vaishnavas. We're not like them. We are more in the category of demigods that tend to make mistakes in their service to the Lord. So by studying the Srimad Bhagavatam, we can understand the mistakes that demigods made, and we can learn to avoid those mistakes for ourselves. It's okay.
Prabhuji, why Lord Shiva is called demigod, though he is a separate Tattva, Shiva Tattva?
So Lord Shiva is a particular, he's his own category of energy actually. I can teach you more by looking at this picture. So you see this Sada Shiva Loka.
Yes.
So when on the causal ocean, the Karana ocean, this Karana ocean, you see this?
Yes.
Karana Dakshaya Vishnu. So he's residing in this particular realm, and when he glances upon the material energy, that glance on the material energy produces Lord Shiva. And then Lord Shiva, the combination of Parvati, they bring forth all the living entities into the existence. Because Krishna does everything through agency. He doesn't actually get directly involved. He engages an agent. So Lord Shiva is like Krishna in the sense that his function is very similar to Krishna because he brings forth the living entities into this world. So he's the personification of Lord Vishnu's glance upon the Mahatattva. And that glance upon the Mahatattva injects the living entities into the material world by which they pursue their material desires. And then at the end, Lord Shiva performs his dance of destruction and destroys the entire particular section or subsection of material energy. So Lord Shiva is like Krishna, but simultaneously he's different from Krishna. Because he's in a position of ultimately servitorship as well. His supremacy is in relationship to his subservience to Krishna. So he's supreme due to his service to Krishna. So just like milk can be transformed into yogurt, correct? But yogurt cannot be transformed into milk. So Vishnu is like milk, which can transform himself into the form of Sadashiva for the purpose of injecting the living entities into this world. But Shiva cannot take the position of Lord Vishnu, but he serves a very important function. So that's why Lord Shiva is worshipped as Vaishnavanam Yatha Shambhu. That he's the topmost Vaishnava because he performs a very important service in the material world. And simultaneously he gives shelter to many living entities. He gives shelter to ghosts and spirits, and simultaneously he is known as Ashutosh. He helps fulfill the desires of his devotees. So people worship Lord Shiva for the purpose of gaining some material reward. So, in one particular account of how merciful Lord Shiva can actually be, and how he directs his worshippers towards the worship of Krishna is given in a story of Sanatana Goswami. Sanatana Goswami was one of the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan. You know Sanatana Goswami? So Sanatana Goswami was one of the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan. and he's performing bhajan in Vrindavan at the Madan Mohana temple, chanting so much, writing books. And Lord Shiva had one devotee who was worshipping him. And he was praying to Ashutosh, please, my Lord, give me the greatest wealth. Please give me the greatest wealth. And he was very, very devoted, worshipping Lord Shiva in this way, seeking the greatest wealth. And so one day Lord Shiva appeared before him. He gave him full darshan. So Lord Shiva, he told him, you go to Vrindavan and you'll meet a sadhu there named Sanatana Goswami. He will give you the greatest wealth. So he went to Vrindavan, and when he arrived, when the devotee of Shiva arrived, he approached Sanatana Goswami and said, my dear Sadhuji, my dear Babaji Maharaj, I hear that you have the greatest wealth. Can you please give me this wealth? And Sanatana Goswami is sitting there thinking, I don't really have much. He said, no, my Lord has told me that you have the greatest wealth. What is this wealth that you have? Yes, I know Shiva said this, but I'm wondering what he's referring to. Oh, you know what? Now I remember. I had this Chintamani stone that I found, but I threw it in this pile over here. It was a trash pile. So he pointed into the trash pile. And he said, if you go over there, you'll find it. You can go find that stone. So he went over and found the stone. Okay, I have the stone. What does it do? He said, you can take this stone and put it to any other object, any metal, and it will turn that metal into gold. Babaji Maharaj, anything into gold? Really? My Lord. And he felt so satisfied in his heart. But then he went off and he was walking, and he was feeling so excited to be able to receive this Chintamani stone. But then he began to think, Babaji Maharaj, Sanatana Goswami, he's given me this Chintamani stone, which is considered, which can produce anything into gold. But why was he leaving it in the dustbin? Why was he leaving it, with all the plates and remnants? Why did he just throw it in the trash? If it's so valuable, why did he give me this? Surely that he must have a greater treasure. So then he returned to Sanatana Goswami. And when he approached Sanatana Goswami, he said, Sadhuji, you've given me this stone, but I think you have another treasure. Otherwise, why would you leave this stone in the trash? And Sanatana Goswami told him, I do have another treasure. But in order to receive that treasure, you have to throw this Chintamani stone into the Jamuna. And it was a risk, because here, he finally has received what he considers to be the greatest wealth by possessing, material wealth, material prestige. You can turn anything to gold. You can practically do anything you want at that point, materially speaking. But he was convinced of what Lord Shiva had told him. And he was convinced through his logic that there must be a greater wealth if Sanatana Goswami has thrown this in the trash. So what is that wealth? So he took the stone and he threw it into the Jamuna. And then Sanatana Goswami initiated him in the chanting of the names of Krishna. So this was the real benediction that Lord Shiva gave his devotees. So we can see that Lord Shiva is gradually directing his devotees towards, he's encouraging them in the worship of Krishna gradually. And some people will conceive of Lord Shiva as being supreme, and the Shiva Purana says that Lord Shiva is supreme. But there's another place in the Matsya Purana which says that when you compare the statements of the Vishnu Purana and when you compare the statements of the Shiva Purana, you should take the statements of the Vishnu Purana to be superior to that of the Shiva Purana. And that is because the statements in another place in the Puranas, it says that the Puranas are divided according to different grades of material conditioning. So there's Puranas which are specifically designated for those who are in Tamagun. There's Puranas which are specifically meant for those who are in Rajagun. And there's Puranas which are for those who are specifically in Sattvagun. And there's a gradation in these, because by reading the Shiva Purana, you'll develop great faith in Lord Shiva. And by hearing about Lord Shiva sufficiently, you'll simultaneously begin to hear that in other Puranas, there's mentions of stories of Lord Shiva. So out of your devotion for Lord Shiva, you'll approach these other Puranas. But in these Puranas, you'll begin to see that Lord Shiva, he has a higher master. And that master is Krishna. And those Puranas will lead you to the Vishnu Purana, Padma Purana, and all these Puranas which are in Sattva. But one can bypass all these Puranas by simply taking shelter of the Amala Purana, Srimad Bhagavatam Pramana Ramalam. So the topmost Purana is the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the final authority on all Vedic knowledge. And what does the Srimad Bhagavatam say? Krishna's tu ete kamsa kalam pumsam Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam. And everything that's mentioned inside of the Srimad Bhagavatam, according to Jiva Goswami, should be understood in relationship to this statement. Ete kamsa kalam pumsam Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam. That Krishna is the Supreme Personality of God. So the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is beyond the conditioning of any mode of material nature, Dharma prochita kaita brota paramo nirmat saramam satam Vedyam vasam atravashta sivedanta patrayo mulanam. The Srimad Bhagavatam is meant for those who are interested in getting free from any cheating form of religion, who are interested in getting free from any materially motivated practice of so-called spiritual realization. And the reason for this is because it distinguishes reality from illusion for the welfare of all. And in order to study this, one has to be completely free from envy. It means that one has to give up any hope in finding satisfaction in material energy. When one gives up any hope in trying to find satisfaction in material energy, their heart becomes very simple. And due to becoming simple-hearted, they're non-envious. And this enviousness and love for Krishna, these two things are like night and day. Krishna Surya Sama, Maya Andhakara. So this enviousness towards living entities, this enviousness towards Krishna, it is what negates prema. Atma Indriya Priti Vacha Taripyadikam Krishna Indriya Prita Icha Dare Premanam. That the difference between lust and love is that lust is to satisfy one's own senses, but love is to satisfy the senses of Krishna. So this enviousness has to be kicked out. And for those who are willing to go through the work of kicking out this enviousness, the Srimad Bhagavatam is specifically meant for them. So one who wants to know what the truth is, and one who wants to go beyond, who wants to distinguish reality from illusion for their own welfare, can take full shelter at the Srimad Bhagavatam. Those who maintain any spirit of material enjoyment will not be able to drive the full fruit of the Srimad Bhagavatam. But those who may have a disposition towards wanting to exploit, Visaya vinivartante, Visaya vinivartante, Nira rasthasa dehinam, Rasavarjam or sapiyasya, param drisva nivartate. That although a taste for material enjoyment remains, by getting a higher taste, param drisva nivartate, one's able to give up the lower taste. So if one honestly studies the Srimad Bhagavatam on a daily basis, then the Srimad Bhagavatam, by its own potency, will begin to eradicate the heart of all unwanted qualities. Yasyam vai shriyamanayam Krishne paramapurushe Bhakti upadyate pumsam soka moha payapaha. And it does this by establishing Krishna as the Paramapurusha. One begins to see that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then, through hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam on a daily basis, Bhakti upadyate pumsam, a feeling of love for the Supreme begins to arise, and that feeling of love that's beginning to rise within the heart, Soka moha bayapaha, Soka moha and baya are all completely eradicated from the heart, simply by hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam. So, anartho pasanam sakshat bhakti yogam madhoksaje lokasya janato vidvams chakre satbhava samhitam. The Srimad Bhagavatam was specifically written for this purpose, that those who are overcome by material illusion that all these material illusions can be mitigated by giving themselves to the hearing process of the Srimad Bhagavatam, which will clearly establish Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, clearly understand the position of Lord Shiva, and clearly understand the position of all the demigods, and then simultaneously give one complete knowledge of who they are as an eternal servant of Krishna. Anugrahaya Bhaktanam. That the Srimad Bhagavatam is spoken specifically for the purpose of attracting living entities through Krishna's wonderful pastimes. And it begins with the first study of the first canto all the way to the 12th canto. And when one studies the Srimad Bhagavatam in full, one will be able to clearly understand the tattva, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who they are, and who everyone else is. Krishna Surya Sama Maya Handakara. When there's Krishna, there's no question of Maya. So Krishna kicks out all the darkness of illusion. And Krishna and the Srimad Bhagavatam are non-different from each other. So if one makes a thorough study of Srimad Bhagavatam and simultaneously chants the holy name, through a scrutinizing study of the Srimad Bhagavatam, a regular scrutinizing study of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the natural byproduct of that will be that one will develop intense chanting for the names of Krishna. And intense chanting, intense attachment for the names of Krishna is the ultimate goal of all spiritual practices. Tara Madhye Nama Shreshta Sarva Nama Sankirtan. Tara Madhye Sarva Shreshta Nama Sankirtan. The best of all the practices of devotional service is the chanting of Krishna's names. And one can develop attachment for the chanting of Krishna's names through a thorough, regular study of the Srimad Bhagavatam. That was a very drawn-out answer.
Yes.
That was a very drawn-out answer but it's an important thing to consider. Because there's a lot of misconceptions in terms of... I stay in Varanasi, so I have to talk to people about this.
Probably, I have another question.
Okay.
The Shivas, they worship Shiva as their supreme person. They refer him as the supreme person. The Shivas, the Shaktas refer Shakti as.
Yeah,
so isn't it all equal?
No. There's difference.
We are worshipping the supreme person in different names, different forms. So ultimately it's going to Krishna.
No. It's just like if you buy a ticket for Paris, you'll go to Paris. You buy a ticket for Kolkata, you'll go to Kolkata. You can't expect to go to Kolkata if you bought a ticket to Paris. So if you're worshipping Shiva, you'll go to Shiva. Yanti Debabrata Devam, Pritun Yanti Pritin Brita, Bhutani Yanti Bhucheja, Yanti Mang Yaji no Pimang. Those who worship the Devas, go to the Devas. Those who worship the ancestors, go to the ancestors. Those who worship the ghosts and spirits, go to the ghosts and spirits. Those who worship me, come to me. So there's a lot of misconceptions in India due to rascals that propagate a philosophy of yatoma tatopa, that many pass but they all lead to the same goal. But actually the Vedas don't say that. Krishna says the exact opposite in the Bhagavad Gita. Yanti deva vrita deva, pitun yanti pitun vrita. So one will attain a particular destination according to the sadhana they engage in. Siddhasya lakshanam yatsat sadhanam sadhakasyata. That the sadhana and the sadhaka should be in line with the siddha, with the ultimate goal. So it's not that one can engage in any spiritual practice and expect to attain the same goal. It's a huge misconception. Practically all over the world this is a huge misconception. And as long as I develop love, then it's okay. And I know I love because I can feel it. But actually the acharyas don't say that. They explain that shraddha, faith, and that practice of sadhana is exhibited through practical acts of surrender. Practical acts of surrender means to accept everything favorable and reject everything unfavorable. So one has to understand the process of spiritual realization and truth. And one shouldn't be shy in trying to understand these things, thinking that it will hamper my feelings of love. Actually, it's just the opposite. It will actually bring about love. Siddhanta bodhi chitte nakara alash, iha hoite Krishna lage sudrit manash. If one makes a thorough study of Siddhanta, one makes a thorough study of Tattva, then one can actually develop attachment for Krishna. But if one just thinks that they can engage in any process that they like, and then their feelings in their mind will do anything, they'll actually be completely misdirected. Because the whole reason why the living entity is existing in this world is due to Ishatvesa Samutena Davan Mohena Bharata Sarva Bhutani Samoham Sagarayanti Parantapa. Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita the reason why the living entity is connected with this material energy is due to the mind. So one could think that they're experiencing spiritual ecstasy just on the basis of mental conception. But if you actually evaluate their spiritual sentiments, you can see that they're fools and rascals. So you have to see who is spiritual and who is not spiritual based on the conclusions of Guru, Shastra, and Sadhu. Not based on just any practical observation whether a person seems saintly or not. What is their actual qualification?
One more question, Prabhu.
Yeah.
So, how to remember that we are not this body, we are the soul? How to remember it always?
It takes practice. Krishna explains this in the Bhagavad Gita. That it's the beginning of it. Asamsayam mahabaho manu durni graham chalam avasyena takonteya vairagyena chalachita. So the first thing that Krishna says is avasyena, that one should engage in a practice. So the practice is chanting Hare Krishna, studying Srimad Bhagavatam, and then vairagyena uchite. Vairagya means following the four regular principles. So it's like a fence, and it's like a garden. So you water the garden while simultaneously putting up the fence. The watering is malihan karise biju aropan shabana kirtana jali kare sechan. You watering the plant of devotion very carefully, protecting it, making sure no weeds come up, and simultaneously you're putting up a fence of the four regulative principles in order to protect it. So through vairagya, by following the four regulative principles of freedom, and then simultaneously through practice of chanting Hare Krishna daily, studying Srimad Bhagavatam, and extending oneself for the mission of the spiritual master. When one extends themselves for the mission of the spiritual master, miracles begin to happen in the life of the living entity. Yagyanpa na purnam moham evam yaisha shri pandava ena buddhani sheshyani rakshashat matmato mahi. One begins to see everything in relationship to Krishna when one has served the mission of the spiritual master properly. So one can remember that they're spiritual when they're serving the proper master, and then simultaneously following the proper practice that master has prescribed. You don't seem satisfied.
Satisfied.
So it's 9:30. I think we have to go because we have